In an effort to find the information that had been lost to time, the real way to wake up the Queen and beat the Siren's game, Sora and Shiro have taken to Avant Heim, the greatest storehouse of knowledge in all of Disboard. And meanwhile, the other two of their party, Stephanie Dola and Izuna Hatsuse, have taken to Elkia Castle in an effort to search the Old King's study for any information on Siren as well. Perhaps the Old King had also tried to wake the Queen at one point in time, or at least delved into that information. And now, currently at Elkia Castle, screams are echoing throughout the halls, an all too familiar sound to the servants of the castle. Stephanie Dola is once again screaming in frustration, something that she's done multiple times since the new monarchs took over. This time, though, she's screaming that she's an idiot, because she just blindly agreed to Sora's request of, go look for a book that you don't even know exists. Search through the 1,000+ books that are in her grandfather's study and, try to find this one little bit of information. Of course, that seems like an impossible task. And to help her with that task, sitting next to Steph on the floor, cross-legged, is a tiny little werebeast girl, who, adorably, is holding a book upside down, saying that she's doing her best to help, and also asking, who's an idiot? To which Steph replies that, well, she's the idiot for agreeing to what Sora and Shiro demanded. And also, in what possible way could Sora and Shiro think that Izuna could help? Because, obviously, Izuna can't even read Imanity. And Izuna simply responds, well, that's what I'm trying to do, Stutch. And Steph, has another nickname now. Instead of just, her regular name, which is Stephanie, or being called Steph, which Blank also uses as a direct insult, calling her A-Steph, now Izuna calls her Stutch. And of course, Steph is a little bit taken aback, because to her that kind of sounds like an insult as well. But Izuna, in her innocence, simply says, well, Grandpa told me that Steph is a duchess. And so Izuna shortened that down to Stutch. She means well. I don't think she has a mean bone in her body. And honestly, I think Steph understands it too, because she just sighs and then breaks the unfortunate news to Izuna that she's holding the book upside down, which she's adorably little embarrassed by, and flips the book back around, and Steph points her in the direction of a book that Steph had used to learn the werebeast language when she was young. It is a game of matching the symbols of the two different languages. And the moment that Izuna heard the word game, her focus narrowed. She ran right to that book and was ready to get to work. She had all the motivation in the world to help her grandfather, because her grandfather, Ino Hatsuse, was still stuck with the Sirens. And Steph, realizing this as well, was motivated to get to work. Putting her exhaustion aside, she was ready to start diving into the books again. That is until a grumbling sound broke her concentration. Regardless of how much Izuna wanted to help her grandfather, she couldn't do so on an empty stomach. So, she demands, Stutch, feed me. And of course, with those pleading eyes that Izuna had, Steph put her exhaustion aside and gave in to the power of cute, pushing herself to go make Izuna some food. Even though in her exhausted state she forgets that she's in Elkia Castle with a number of cooks present in the castle that could just make the food for Izuna while Steph gets some rest. But Steph is ever the hard worker and does go make some food for Izuna. But with that, we now cut over to the main event. 20,000 meters in the sky. We are at Avant Heim, the city built upon the back of a phantasma, the home of the Flugel and the greatest storehouse of knowledge in all of Disboard. And Sora and Shiro are looking at it, and, well, the description given in the light novel is honestly the best description I've ever seen for a location that's been given. The way the author describes this: take a Rubik's Cube, okay? An intellectual puzzle. Hand that Rubik's Cube to someone of severely limited intellect. Can you imagine it? Okay. Now, give it a couple moments, and what is the Rubik's Cube like? Now, disassembled with pliers, all of the cubes of the Rubik's Cube are scattered across the floor. Repeat this process about 1,000 more times. And this is about what Sora and Shiro are seeing. The city of Avant Heim is constructed of just blocks that are scattered about everywhere with no real common sense. Typical for the Flugel, who don't really obey the laws of common sense anyways. There was no roads, no nothing, but to be fair, Flugel can shift anywhere they want at a moment's notice, so they don't have a need for roads or sense, for that matter. Along with everything they're seeing, though, the air is also a lot thinner up on Avant Heim. Being 20,000 meters in the sky will do that to you. And having been 12,000 feet up in the air jumping out of a plane myself, I can confirm that the air is a little bit thinner up there. And Sora and Shiro were even higher up than that. 20,000 meters is above the clouds. But they still notice, looking up, that the sky is still blue. Being that high up, it shouldn't be the case. And Jibril explains that is because the city is upon the back of a phantasma, Ixseed Rank 2, one rank higher than the elementals. And the elementals are also known as the spirits. They are the things that are essentially magic itself. The manipulation of spirits is how one performs magic. And Phantasma are a rank above them. Essentially, you can think of Phantasma as discrete worlds. They are worlds in and of themselves. They have such a high concentration of spirits that they are above the individual spirits that are around Disboard, that populate everywhere on Disboard, and are within every living being on the planet. Phantasma, fitting the common theme among all the upper 6 ranks of the Ixseed, also defy sense and logic. As does the Flugel's concept of design, as Sora looks off in the distance and notices a dragon skull that seems to be decorated with ribbons underneath an abnormally large tree on Avant Heim. This is something that we did see in the anime. There is the dragon skull in front of the tree that is on Avant Heim those couple times that we do see it. And, fun fact, this is the dragon skull that Jibril killed during the Great War, the conquest of the only Flugel able to take on a Dragonia alone and win. And as an additional fact, for those who have not read the light novels, we actually have the full description of this fight in one of the later light novels. We have the full thing, and I'll be making videos on that when we get to that point. So make sure to subscribe if you are interested in that. Now, however, Sora's attention is snapped back to reality at the screaming of a little Dampier next to him. Plum, who had been using magic to help her resist the sunlight, apparently is having her magic consumed at a much higher rate now and is screaming that she's going to die. So Sora turns to Jibril and asks her to simply take them somewhere inside, if possible, where the greatest store of knowledge would be on Avant Heim, so that they could try to find the information that they need. And Jibril, she agrees to do this, of course, but uncharacteristically, she turns to her masters and meekly takes their hands in hers, and makes a strange request, asking them both to not despair of her, and to please have faith in her. After she makes that request, and although Sora and Shiro don't really understand, they agree that they will have faith in her, she then teleports them into what is presumably one of the cubes that they had seen from the outside. A grand library of books, seemingly 10 stories high and just completely stacked with books, putting the Grand Library of Elkia to shame with how much knowledge is contained here. But there's also another concern that's currently at hand, likely due to Jibril shifting them all inside, along with the air that they would need to breathe. Well, when there's a space that has no air or very little air in it, and then you all of a sudden introduce a bunch of air to it, well, you know, it kind of causes a huge rush of wind as the air rushes to fill that space. And given the amount of air that Jibril can teleport with herself, well, you can see what that might kind of do to a library, as gale force winds are swirling around and books are, well, flying with them. It's a hurricane of knowledge, essentially, and well, Sora says, Jibril, this is your doing, isn't it? And Jibril simply smiles and says, well, don't worry, my masters. This library is owned by the one who put into place that loathsome book-sharing act, so there shouldn't be any problem. Jibril hates this book-sharing act. This is the reason why she left Avant Heim in the first place, why she fled Avant Heim and took over the Great Library of Elkia. And Jabril continues, saying that the Book Sharing Act dictates that these books owned by one Flugel are owned by all Flugel. Therefore, these books are also my books. And, of course, one as magnanimous as the individual who would put into place the Book Sharing Act, all the while knowing that I might make a mistake such as this, even if it was intentionally, would of course have a heart big enough to overlook such a trifling matter. Essentially, as Sora surmised, if they're the Flugel's books, then they're also her books, meaning she could wreck them as much as she wanted. Regardless of if they are one-of-a-kind tomes or grimoires that have no replacement in the entire world, surely she would be forgiven because, well, the Book Sharing Act put that in place. This just shows how much Jabril hates this Book Sharing Act. And throughout this volume, it makes it very clear why Jabril hates the Book Sharing Act so much and why it was implemented by this certain individual in the first place. And speaking of this individual, Sora hears a wailing from elsewhere in the library. And as he looks up, he sees another angelic being flitting around to try to grab the books. Books that she's screaming she hasn't read yet. Knowledge that she hasn't obtained. And as he looks at this Flugel, with a halo more complex than Jabril's, her jade hair and heterochromatic eyes, along with a single horn on her head, this is a Flugel who Sora sees as someone quite different from Jabril, lacking that same inorganic quality that Jabril had when they first met. Sora thinks that she might even be considered cute, as she was flitting around with tears almost in her eyes as she was trying to grab all of the different books. Jabril then introduces her as the ally potentiary of the Flugel, her elder, Azrael. And we've seen Azrael before. If you've watched No Game No Life 0, the movie that focused on Volume 6 of the light novels, which covers all of the Great War, she was the leader of the Flugel's forces during that war. And if you recall seeing her during the Great War, you might notice a couple things different about her. She didn't have heterochromia at that point in time, nor did she have the horn on her head. And so that is something that she must have gained after the Covenants were put in place, after that war came to an end. Something that I'll get to in a couple moments. But for now, Azrael tries to greet Jabril by trying to glomp her, trying to rush in for a hug, to which Jabril quickly shifts out of the way, causing Azrael to slam into a bookcase and have a bunch of books fall on her. And Sora just looks at this Flugel, half buried in a pile of books, and, asks, "This is the agent plenipotentiary of the Flugel, the representative of the race?" Seeming it to be a little unbelievable. Azrael then shifts from under the pile of books to Jabril's side faster than Sora and Shiro can comprehend it. And she's now rubbing her cheek against Jabril's, saying that her little sister Jibs is such a meanie, but that's part of her charm. Jabril's response to this, however, is one of an uncharacteristic nature. She tells Azrael that she's as disgusting as ever. No quips, no snark remarks, no typical banter that we have come to expect from Jabril. Just a direct insult. But Azrael seems to pay it no mind. In fact, all she seems to care about is getting Jabril to call her big sister, which of course Jabril is refusing to do. Sora and Shiro are obviously confused again by her actions, but really they just came for the information, and ask Jabril if they can have permission to look through all of the books that are present. Azrael says she will only agree to it if Jabril calls her big sister. Again, the only thing that she seems to care about. And Jabril says she'll consider doing so if Azrael gives them permission. So Azrael immediately gives them permission and asks Jabril to call her big sister, to which Jabril declines. Despite Azrael's protests that Jabril tricked her, that she lied, Jabril said, well, she'd consider it, and decided not to, much to Azrael's dismay. Regardless of that, though, Sora and Shiro now have access to the vast stores of knowledge in Avant Heim. But given this entire exchange, they still don't really see how Azrael is the agent plenipotentiary. And this is where Jabril corrects them. She is not the agent plenipotentiary. She is the ally potentiary. Which, of course, Sora is asking what exactly is the difference. Now, an agent plenipotentiary is the representative of an entire race. Like, Sora and Shiro are the agent plenipotentiary for humanity. The Shrine Maiden is for Werebeast. But for Flugel, The agent plenipotentiary, the decision-making factor for the entire race, is the Council of 18 Wings. There are 9 Flugel that are the major power that decide what it is that the entire race does. Jibril is a member, and Azrael is also a member. But Azrael does have the extra title of being the ally potentiary. Under certain circumstances, she has the final decision-making power. What those circumstances are, I'm guessing it has something to do with wartime, as well as certain other privileges that we will find out later on. But she does not have the vast decision-making power for everything that goes on in Avant Heim and everything to do with the entire race of Flugel. For example, one of the things that she brought up to the Council of 18 Wings is to try to get it mandated essentially by law that Jibril has to be the little sister of all of the Flugel, that she has to refer to her elder as Big Sister. Of course, the rest of the council shot her down instantly, as it seems most of the requests that Azrael brings to the council are shot down very quickly. It seems that she's widely considered a bit of an idiot, by Jibril, at the very least, who's constantly calling her stupid, but Azrael then goes on to clarify why she's so insistent on this, saying that their late lord, their creator, the old deus, the god of war, Artosh, created many kids near the end of the war. Azrael refers to the other Flugel that were created as kids, because she is in fact the first Flugel that was ever created. But near the end of the war, when Artosh was at the height of his power, he created many other Flugel, all of which died in the final battle, except for Jibril. And Jibril is special, as she was the final Flugel ever created. She is the closing number, the strongest of the Flugel. In fact, Azrael even says that compared to the Flugel that were created earlier on, they can't even compare. Jibril is just that much stronger. Jibril, for reference, is 6,407 years old, whereas Azrael is 26,000 years old, which gives an idea of, how long the Great War actually spanned for. It had gone for tens of thousands of years, and Artosh, the god of war, was not there at the beginning of the war, but slowly gained power as the war became more prominent and spread across Discord. I'm going to be making multiple videos on the Great War to explain things that happened in the Great War, and potentially give my ideas on what started the Great War, how things kicked off, and everything of that nature. In summary, though, the Flugel that were created later on in the Great War are supposedly much stronger than those who were created near the beginning of Artosh's rise to power. As Azrael is explaining all of this, though, she's flying merrily in figure eights throughout the library, and Sora is simply watching her. And he realizes that his initial plan is not going to work. And he verbally says, "Damn it, looks like we're going to have to change our plans." To which Azrael does not respond kindly. She glares at him and asks if he's the one who's been screwing with her little jibs. She then took a step towards him, but that step was something that disregarded space. Essentially, Azrael had gone from flying merrily in the air to right in Sora's face in the blink of an eye, faster than Sora could even comprehend. And at the same time, there was a burst of air as Jibril moved in between the two of them. This was an act of hostility. Jibril warned Azrael to reconsider carefully if her intent was to harm her masters. But Azrael laughed it off merrily, saying that the 10 Covenants are in place. And then she turned her attention back to Sora. And even though Jibril was there, and the Covenants were in place, the look that Azrael was giving him told Sora that give the wrong answer and it meant death. And so Azrael asked him a simple question. Would Jibril call me Big Sister if you ordered her to? And immediately all of the tension that Azrael had put up was completely removed. And Azrael even goes on to say that you even got her to lick the feet of an elf. With that kind of authority, they could even order Jibril to take a bath with Azrael. And at the mention of a bath, Sora then does mention that on his phone he does have some footage of such a thing, and Azrael immediately snaps to respond, saying, "I bet the Flugel piece." The Flugel race piece is what she is referring to, because she wants the footage of Jibril in the bath. Jibril immediately shuts that down, though, saying, "You have no authority to do so, and surely the council would shoot down such a request." And so, In turn, Azrael then makes a peculiar offer, saying that she too would become Sora and Shiro's property, because then she'd probably be able to take a bath with Jabril. Shiro actually thought this might be a good idea. If she was offering herself up in a game that she might throw, then why not take this opportunity to get another Flugel under their control? Especially one who's the allipotentiary of the Flugel and a member of the Council of 18 Wings. So Shiro looked up to her brother for confirmation, and the look on her brother's face confused Shiro, because Sora was completely disinterested, not even caring about what Azrael was saying. And so Shiro looked back to Azrael, and then, after a moment, she understood what Sora had saw. Sora, in turn, brushed off everything Azrael said, and even going so far as to call her useless, saying that he was talking all high and mighty about claiming 3 races instead of 2. Now he's going to have to go back to Elkia and apologize to Steph, saying that he was overconfident. For now, Jabril's just going to have to be enough. And so, he walks away with Shiro to start delving into the books and the vast stores of knowledge that he has been given permission to look through. This leaves Jabril and Azrael alone to talk, and Azrael turns to Jabril and says, "Sorry, Jibs, I thought by offering myself up as bait I could get you back." Azrael had no intention of helping Sora and Shiro. She had no respect for them whatsoever, and was only trying to find a way to coerce them into a game in an effort to get Jabril out from under their control. Azrael then continues, saying that it's obvious that they must have used some trick or cheat or something to get Jabril under their control. Surely, with Jabril's power, she should be able to use the Covenants to pressure them into a game and free herself. And Azrael looks at Jabril and says, "You've changed, Jibs." Jabril confirms that she has changed, unlike Azrael, who never can. And this is where Jabril really talks down to Azrael, saying that Azrael can't even consider the possibility that Jabril was challenged and lost. Azrael is incapable of understanding and incapable of change, and that is what disgusts Jabril so much about her. She goes on further to state that this is the reason why she left Avant Heim and why she turned her back not only to Azrael but her departed lord, Artosh. They are both so hard-headed, and Jabril couldn't bear to see it anymore. And she debates whether she should go even further, and decides that she should, and goes to say that is the reason why the Flugel failed, and that is the reason why you cannot change. Them being so hard-headed, their incapability of understanding, is the reason why they lost the Great War, why their lord died, and ultimately, why they are unable to change. This simple assertion, this one little sentence, was enough to strip away the entire guise that Azrael had set up. With the face of a puppet, devoid of emotion, devoid of truth, Azrael, or rather, something that looked like Azrael, turned towards Jabril and asked, "Hast thou found the answer?" To which Jabril looked down in disgust at the thing next to her, saying that she had found the answer long ago, but simply lacked proof, and with that left the thing that was sitting next to her by its lonesome as she went to go help her masters. This left Azrael alone to converse with the will of Avant Heim inside of her. They had a little conversation about whether Jabril actually had found the answer, wondering if the answer that Jabril had found was wrong. And Avant Heim decided to defer to Azrael, leaving the decision up to her. In fact, they all have left their decision up to her, which is a very relevant phrase, something that will come up later on in the volume, so keep this in mind. Azrael says she understands, and looks over to Sora and Shiro as they're rummaging through the books. She knows they will attack again, and so she will wait and bide her time. And when they do come to her again, then she would ask. This little exchange, this brief exchange in this chapter, explains that the will of Avant Heim is within Azrael. They are linked, and it is surmised that this is what caused her heterochromia and the horn to grow on her head, the link that she has with Avant Heim, something that only happened after the Covenants. Because before, during the Great War, Avant Heim responded directly to Artosh, and now that Azrael and Avant Heim are linked, Azrael had some physiological changes. In the meantime, Sora and Shiro were doing their best to sift through all of these books, but after only 30 minutes, Sora quickly realized that it was futile. There was just too many books to go through, and in too many different languages. Shiro, since coming to Disboard, had been able to learn 3 different languages, while Sora had only been able to learn Imanity thus far. And with only Jabril helping them out, even though she could read the books to them in the languages that they did not know, well, that would take way too much time to sift through all this information. And although they had bought themselves some time with Siren, by Sora leaving with that threat, saying if you touch him, you know what'll happen to you, don't you? Well, if Siren actually started to believe that Sora and Shiro did in fact run away from the game, then Ino would be in danger. And so, now, Sora and Shiro, since they missed their mark, now they're going to have to improvise. Initially, they had intended to get Azrael to help them with their search for information, but Sora was able to easily see through her facade, and realized that Azrael had zero intention of helping them whatsoever. I'm guessing that Sora thought that, well, Azrael might have the same thirst for knowledge that Jabril had, wanting to figure out what the reason for the Queen's slumber actually was, and that similar drive that all Flugel supposedly shared would encourage Azrael to at least want to help them a little bit. But no, Azrael had no interest in such a thing. But Sora had to go talk to her anyways, and was now playing into her hand. When he went over to talk to her, though, Azrael had put up another facade. She had darkened the area around herself, had put a blanket over her head, and was staring at a TV screen that was just covered in static, trying to create the most depressing scene that she had probably read about in some book at some point. And Sora tried going up to talk to her, but Azrael was showing no interest. Sora even tried offering up the footage that he had of Jabril on his phone, and yet no interest was shown. Sora had at least hoped that Azrael's interest in Jabril, that her fawning over her little sister, was real, but no, even that too was a facade. Through this conversation, Sora had also mentioned that he was looking for information on the Siren's game, to which Azrael simply stated that, oh yeah, the Queen went to sleep wanting her to fall in love. Story known all throughout Disboard, the biggest idiots on Disboard being the Siren. And Sora simply tells her, yeah, that's all BS, that's not how the game actually works. And there was a hint of interest from Azrael, but she quickly set that aside, because, well, she doesn't know where any of those books are. It's the book sharing act. Those books could have been shared around all sorts of different places. She has no interest in helping Sora and Shiro, and she wouldn't even know where to start looking. For all Azrael cared, once she's read a book and memorized all of the knowledge in it, she doesn't care if the book is destroyed. But at that point, the other kids would get upset because they haven't read the book yet. And this is exactly why Jabril hates the book sharing act so much, is because Azrael just simply memorizes the books and considers that gaining knowledge. Sora realizes what this actually means, but disregards it for the time being because they have a more pressing matter at hand. They're making no progress with Azrael, so Sora resorts to what he does best and starts taunting Azrael, saying that she really is just a useless walking corpse, a puppet without a master, a tool with no one to use her, and says that, fine, screw it, I guess Jabril really will be enough, and he turns to leave. But Azrael stands up and says, you think you can pick a fight with me and then just walk away? And Sora thinks that he got her. Azrael continues in saying that if you want the help of Flugel, if you want the help of everyone that Jabril knows, well, you'll have to take them all on. And before they knew it, everyone present was transported to another location, where 100 pairs of eyes quickly snapped to Sora and Shiro, causing the pair to almost black out. Above where they were standing was a sign that read, blank meet and greet. Handshakes and photo ops and etc., etc. And Sora, on the brink of passing out, simply asked Jabril, what the hell is this? To which Jabril simply said, well, she's been spreading word of Sora and Shiro's exploits all throughout the Flugel, and have been handing out tickets for handshakes, for photo ops, for dates, for the opportunity to lie with them, etc. To which Sora obviously responds that that's only going to get the crazies to show up, but in short, this is their fan club. And this also explains how Azrael knew so much about them already. For example, how they got Jabril to lick the feet of an elf, and everything that they've done up until this point. Azrael already knows because Jabril had spread this evangelism, had spread the gospel of her masters all throughout Avant Heim. Which also is a bit odd. I mean, Jabril adores her masters so much and reveres them so deeply that she's even willing to include the fact that she had to lick the feet of an elf and spread that information throughout all of the other Flugel. Like, this is how much Jabril believes in her masters. But upon being transported and seeing the 100 Flugel present, Sora immediately grasped what had happened. Azrael taking Sora's bait, giving in to his taunting, was also part of Azrael's act. Sora had been outplayed by Azrael, and now Sora and Shiro were now being coerced into a game against 100 Flugel all at once. Jabril and Azrael then exchanged some words in what is presumably the Flugel language, a language that Sora and Shiro could not understand. But everyone present who had been squealing at the sight of blank at this point in time, all of their fans loved that the people that they were fans of showed up unexpectedly, well, they all fell dead silent at the words that were exchanged between Jabril and Azrael. After these words were exchanged, though, Jabril turned to her masters and clarified the game that would be played. There were too many Flugel present to play Shiritori. As Sora was saying, do you want us to die if we play this much Shiritori? But no, instead, they would take on all the Flugel at once in a game of tag. All blank has to do is evade 100 Flugel, who can nearly break the laws of physics for 1 hour. Seems doable enough for two humanity, right? To take on a game that they were unprepared for, with information that had been hidden from them in the conversation that was had between Jabril and Azrael, against 100 Flugel who could move faster than they could see. Yeah, Sora obviously thought this was a death sentence, and really, he didn't necessarily have to accept the game, except for the one who had set up this game. The one who was looking at him with pleading eyes, eyes that reiterated what she had said before. Please, have faith in me. And the look that Jabril gave to Sora was enough to convince him to accept this game. The conviction that Jabril had that Sora and Shiro would win, that there was no chance that they would lose. And so, up until this point, Sora and Shiro had been freaking out. They're not, used to being the center of attention, especially with 100 eyes completely drawn to them. Introverts like themselves were at the brink of passing out. But now that Sora had made up his mind, had decided to accept this game, his head cooled off and his thoughts began to streamline. This also put Shiro at ease. Now that her brother had made up his mind, she too became more focused on the game. Jabril thanked them both, and Sora said that he does believe in her. And Shiro put it best, saying that family has to be protected. It's only been a short time since Sora and Shiro came to this world, since they even met Jabril, but they already consider Jabril to be part of their family, as I'm sure they do with Steph and Izuna at this point too. Probably even the Shrine Maiden and Ino, everyone that they've encountered up until this point. They trust Jabril for the sheer fact that they're taking on this seemingly impossible game. And so, now that Sora's decided to accept this game, there's some rules that need to be clarified. First and foremost, that, Sora and Shiro can't fly. Given that Avant Heim has no roads and nothing, they're going to need some way to get around. And so, Azrael quickly turns to the empty space that had been next to them and says, "You there, Dampier, you become their wings." The spell that Plum had put up to conceal her presence quickly shattered, and everyone else who had forgot that Plum was there now remembered Plum's existence. Azrael, though, never lost sight of Plum, it seems. Azrael continues, saying to Plum with just, a little bit of hostility that surely you could weave a rite like that to create wings for the two of them if you pushed yourself as if you were going to die. Which, Plum said, I don't know, I don't even know if I can do that. Sora, though, said that during the game, you're freely permitted to lick as much sweat as you would like from the two of us. And Plum's expression quickly changed, saying, sure, I will do the best that I can. And quickly, her wings turned crimson, the magic circles appeared in her eyes, and she transformed herself into a scarf that wrapped itself around Sora and Shiro, each end of the scarf now acting as a single wing. Plum had transformed herself in the physical plane, creating an illusion so that she could now act as the wings for Sora and Shiro, giving them the ability to fly during this game. Sora then further clarified that throughout the game, Sora and Shiro would be holding hands, and they would each control one of the wings, so that they would be able to coordinate with one another and be able to maneuver around that way. Additionally, Avant Heim would have to be rearranged so that they could actually maneuver about the city. Presumably, up until this point, it had just been so chaotic, the Rubik's Cubes scattered everywhere, that it wasn't exactly cohesive for moving around the city, as Flugel don't need to do that. They can just teleport from place to place, so they didn't really need any clear pathways through Avant Heim. Azrael says that's no problem at all, and with pretty much the snap of her fingers, Avant Heim is rearranged. And, being as magnanimous as Azrael is, she limits the Flugel from being able to shift. Instead, they will just use their physical abilities. Something that's on par with the werebeasts. The ones, again, who can almost break the laws of physics, and can do so once they go into their blood break. So, at least they won't have to deal with blood break, but 100 Flugel is still enough for two humanity. You'd think, at least. Jabril also then adds that since this is a game of Flugel, we should also incorporate wordplay, as she conjures up 46 characters in the language of Sora and Shiro's world, that being Japanese. She conjures these 46 characters, or syllables in the Japanese language, and disperses them among the 100 Flugel that are present. Throughout the game, if blank can touch one of those symbols, they will gain that character, assuming that they aren't caught themselves while doing so. They can then use these characters to form words, and those words will materialize something in the physical world as per their intent behind the word. And that is very important. It is the individual's intent behind the word that will conjure something. So even if it is, a specific word that could mean a few different things, it is whatever Sora and Shiro intend it to mean. And that will become a factor in this game later on. Each character, though, can only be used a single time. So limited resources, and they'll have to plan accordingly. The last thing, though, is that, Sora and Shiro don't know how to use their new wings. So Sora says that they need a 5-minute head start to be able to learn how to fly. At this, everyone present audibly gulped. Essentially, with this, Sora was saying that he had grasped the game and was confident in taking on 100 Flugel with their physical capabilities in a game of tag, having never flown before, and all he would need is 5 minutes of practice to be able to win. Everyone there understood what that meant. That if he was capable of this, then, what other potential could he have? Well, everyone there was able to understand what Sora intended, except for Azrael, who simply thought that, they seem to be going too easy on the two humanity. She really had no care whatsoever and no understanding. But with that, everyone was in agreement. The rules of the game had been set out, and everyone, except for Jabril, swore by the covenants and claimed Ashente. The wagers of this game were, of course, that if Sora and Shiro were to win, then all of the Flugel present would help search for the information that Sora and Shiro want to get. But if the Flugel were to win, then they would get everything that they wanted from blank. The handshakes, the dates, laying with them, everything that they wanted. Essentially, for Sora and Shiro, the extreme introverts that they are, that would be pretty much a nightmare. Not necessarily a death sentence. If they lost, then, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not like a race piece was being wagered on this, but there is information that has been hidden from Blank in the conversation that Jibril and Azrael had. Maybe the stakes are a bit higher than initially laid out. But with the game now underway, Azrael opened up a hole in the side of the cube that they had been inside, revealing the night sky beyond. The city of Avant Heim had been rearranged, and now, whether it was due to Avant Heim making it so, or just due to the passage of time, it was now night, which was perfect considering Plum was acting as their scarf, and thus would not have to consume her magic to also protect herself from the sun's rays. Instead, just being able to focus on keeping the right intact, that was creating the scarf and the wings that Sora and Shiro would be using. Before leaving, Jibril handed Shiro a map of the new layout of Avant Heim. And with that, Sora and Shiro walked to the edge of the gap and leapt into the air. The game against the Flugel had now begun. And to learn more about that, we will have to wait for the next chapter. This is the first introduction that we have had to Avant Heim, the city of the Flugel, and especially Azrael. Other than what we saw during No Game No Life 0, which technically in the light novels is Volume 6, so this is supposed to be our first introduction to Azrael. And although on her surface she appears as just an adorable Flugel, with the cutesy act that she puts on, she adds nyan to pretty much every one of her sentences. Like, when you're reading the light novel, which I highly encourage everyone to do, she just seems like a very adorable character. But through this volume, there is a lot of depth and, in my opinion, quite a bit of sadness to her character as well. A lot that she has gone through, and there is so much that this volume contains. And if you want to see more of this volume, to see more No Game No Life, more of Azrael, and especially the Flugel game that is about to take place, make sure to subscribe to the Daily Flugel, as there is much more to come. And if you want to see some games played live, I also stream on Twitch a couple times a week. Would love to see you there. We could talk about No Game No Life, or anything else for that matter. So, with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video. Ashente.